Hello, everyone. I'm really glad to be here at JNUC holding a session. And first of all, I'd like to thank you all for being here because I know there are other great sessions at the same time. So I really appreciate that. And before we jump right into that, I'd like to say a few words about myself. So I joined SAP 4 years ago as a student, and I visited different departments. And I ended up 2 years ago in the enterprise mobility team. And that was actually just in time for one of the probably biggest projects for the enterprise mobility team. And that was, of course, the transition to Jamf Pro as our main mobile MDM solution for iOS devices. And yeah, that's really the journey that I'd like to present to you today. And it's structured in three major points. The first one is the actual movement to Jamf. We had our own solution. What did we need to do to actually get to Jamf? And then also what it means to manage so many devices, like tens of thousands of devices. And also one real benefit that we offer for our users is the usage of mobile apps. Obviously, everything you consume is more or less through a mobile app on your phone or on your iPad or whatever. So that's really something we encourage our employees to use. And I'd like to present a few apps that really emphasize that. So let's jump right in with the initial situation that we had. 2 years ago, we had our own in-house MDM solution where we managed our iOS and Android devices as well. With that said, we also had quite a lot of in-house apps that we developed in-house. So just for our employees, they had native apps they could use to really work mobile without the need of a laptop or a MacBook or something else. So that was really great. It's a great situation. Every one of our users that really need their phone used these apps. But what we didn't have, or we didn't have any clue about that basically, was DEP and VPP. So the automated device enrollment was non-existent, which meant that every time an employee got the device, they had to unwrap it, set it up normally through the assistant, and then they had to enroll the device, which is kind of a pain. And also we didn't have VPP, which meant that every single employee had to create an Apple ID if they wanted, for example, one of the Office apps. So yeah, not a great experience there. Something we did already have at that time was 17,000 Macs managed by Jamf Pro. So we were not new to Jamf. We just didn't have it for our iOS devices. And this is a typical screen, how it looked like for normal employees when they had their phone out. So you can see a lot of apps on this slide. We have basically a color code for our apps, and there are 4 colors. The blue ones are productivity apps. They are more like a generic kind of apps, so you can use it for no matter what kind of role you have at SAP, like a campus app, for example, where you can see buildings for different locations. You can just open that one and search for something. The green ones are communication apps, so we have an in-house chat client, for example, that is where you are allowed to actually talk about business stuff without being worried that someone else could access this data. Then we have our purple apps, which are more like a game style to get your knowledge fresh up about SAP. So we have like a Wikipedia for SAP or a quiz app, just to get your mind freshed up. And then we have the yellow apps, which are quite specific actually. They are for our sales colleagues. So whenever a sales colleague is in the field, they can use these apps to actually get work done. So everything they could normally do with, let's say, a computer, they just need their phone right now. They don't have to carry anything else around. And so that's really helpful, and I think the majority of the sales colleagues use these apps. Most of these apps are developed native, and with the help for the SAP Cloud Platform SDK that came out of the Apple and SAP partnership. And so most of them use real device benefits like authentication or local notification, push notifications, Touch ID, Face ID, whatever the device capables are. So that's great and everything. For our users, they were used to the situation. Something that wasn't quite as cool was our self-service, which wasn't called self-service before. It was called Mobile Place, and it was a website. It was super slow, like typical hybrid apps that would load forever. But that's just a small thing. But we had to change. Like, these devices were involved in our old MDM solution, and we had to get them to the new MDM, Jamf. And now the big question is, how do you move 80,000 devices to a different MDM? And well, we answered that question, and we helped our users doing exactly that by showing them this video.
If you have a SAP iPhone or iPad with the Mobile Place app installed, you have to migrate to Jamf Pro to enable more features. It may sound complicated, but it's easy peasy and takes just a few steps. Let me show you how. Open the Mobile Place app. Tap Migrate to Jamf. Tap it again. Once you migrate, your SAP apps will be removed from your device, but fear not, you can reinstall them via the self-service app after. Tap Continue. Remember to finish ongoing tasks since they won't be stored after the migration. Then, if you are connected to the Wi-Fi, tap Start Migration. Wait for the browser to open, then enter your SAP credentials and log in. Tap Allow. And install. Enter your passcode. Tap Install and Trust. And done. Now, wait for the SAP apps to install. Then, open the Apple at SAP app to restore your apps and set up single sign-on. Choose to restore apps or install them later. If you chose install later, you can always come back to the Apple at SAP app to reinstall them. Tap OK. That's it, you're all done and have migrated to the Jamf server.
Right, so this little video was sent to all of our employees that had devices in our MDM system. And I wanted to focus a bit more on the migration tool that we developed. So it was totally self-developed, and the screens that you can see here actually don't do anything, like literally anything. They just show information about what is Jamf, why do I need to migrate, and what's happening after I tap Start Migration. It's super simple, and every employee could simply just do it with one button, literally. And what it does in the background, after you tap Start Migration on the third screen, it would send a de-enrollment MDM command to our old MDM solution. It would save the apps that you had installed, especially in-house apps, into a group keychain as a list. And then it would forward the user to Safari, where you can enroll into Jamf. This is a bit critical, because at the time you send the de-enrollment MDM command to our old MDM solution, it could happen that the app closes right away, because after that time you send this command, you have no control over the app whatsoever. It was an in-house app, so it was removed when the MDM profile were removed as well. So the user had to be in Safari in the enrollment page to get the new MDM solution pop up correctly. There are some very rare cases where the user wouldn't get forwarded and the app technically just crashes and the user's left without an MDM profile at all. And then there's the other way around, where it would forward to Safari, but the unenrollment MDM command wasn't sent correctly to the device. So technically the user tried to enroll in Jamf, but couldn't install the profile because the old one was still there. But these were really rare cases. Usually that worked out great. And we got real good feedback for that. So yeah, self-developed solution, but it's really generic. Like, you can adopt that to other MDM solutions as well, as long as there is some kind of API that you can communicate with. So now our users have their device finally in Jamf. That's cool. From an IT perspective, how did we start with Jamf? Well, the first thing that we did in November 2018 is enable DEP for every new device that came into the company. So everyone who ordered a new iPhone after November were automatically enrolled in Jamf. They might knew the old MDM solution because of an older device, but they wouldn't have to carry around or do the migration whatsoever. After that, we took our time to develop this migration tool just to make that really working flawlessly. And we started the device migration in February 2019. We communicated that through blog posts and email waves so that the users were really aware of what is happening and why they are supposed to do that. And I wanted to show you some numbers of how the adoption for Jamf actually worked. So you can see that graph starting in February, where we already had around 22,000 devices in Jamf. These were the devices that we migrated manually for testing in IT services, or that were just renewed when the user ordered a new device. So after that, you can see that in mid of March, we kind of reached the intersection where half of our fleet was managed by Jamf and the other one still in the old MDM solution. And then all of that was completely done until the end of July. And at that point, we reached 100% coverage from Jamf Pro for our mobile fleet. There were a few devices left in our old system that were just, lost in the drawer somewhere. No one ever found it. We just sent them an unenrollment command, and whenever they were ready to receive that, they would unenroll from the old MDM solution, but they had never, they didn't have access to any resources anymore. They couldn't access Exchange, they couldn't use our apps anymore, and they didn't have a single sign-on anymore. So these were really a few cases only. And I think just over 6 months, we were able to migrate these rest 67,000 devices and in total 80,000 devices to Jamf Pro. And what that means in a number, where we are right now, we are managing over 84,000 mobile devices, iOS devices in Jamf. And I think that's a great number. Just in perspective for that, an iOS device sends an inventory update every 24 hours. So if you calculate that through this number, you would get to basically an inventory update every single second. Our server receives every single second an inventory update. And that's quite ridiculous. And in addition to that, we also have 150 new enrollments every day around the globe. So that could be because of a device change or a new hire, for example, if they get a new device. So that's quite an impressive number as well. So that's cool from a number perspective, but how does our setup actually look like? Well, just to go over some basics for that, we have 2 Jamf Cloud instances, one for production, one for test, which allows us to also support 0-day support for new operating system versions. So every time Apple releases a new beta and also Jamf releases a new beta, we can test everything and make sure it works before we put it in production, and so our users can benefit from the new features. And also, finally, with Jamf, we have a dead simple DEP enrollment. So our users are no longer bugged with lots of entering passwords and everything, and all the pop-ups they get when installing applications. They can just enroll once and have everything set up without entering the password ever again. And in order to make that happen, this one password only, we also work with the ADCS and the ADCS connector to issuing user certificates to the device. And I want to show you how that actually works. So we have our Jamf Pro instance that is connected to the ADCS connector, which itself is connected to ADCS. So when we request a certificate, the ADCS sends it back to Jamf Pro over the connector, and that gets sent to the mobile device. Now, there are actually 2 ways to put the user certificate to the device. The first one is simply through a configuration profile. You would add it there, and it can be used for the device to authenticate in first-party applications like Safari, for example. So that's really simple. But we also have, like I mentioned in the first few slides, a lot of in-house apps. And it would be really bad if the user had to enter a password every time he would open an app. So that's why we also wanted to have the certificate-based authentication in our apps. And that's where the certificate SDK from Jamf plays into. So we use that to actually get the same user certificate and put it in a custom app keychain group, so that all of our apps that we develop in-house can access this certificate and authenticate against our services, like an SAP backend, for example. So that's really useful, and our employees love that. Finally get rid of most of their password entries. While we're at it, what is the real benefit from Jamf for our end users? That's a really good question. Our setup is obviously more complicated. We have more technical stuff like smart group setups, configuration profiles, some restrictions, or whatever. But our users don't really see that. So I wanted to focus on more what the user experiences, and that is most often through apps. And the first app that I'd like to not introduce to you, because you all know that, it's a self-service app. And the self-service app is actually really beneficial for us. We come from a place where we had like a website to install applications. It was slow, it took forever, it was buggy. So we really appreciate that we have a native app store kind of app that we can host our in-house apps, and also apps that we provide our users through VPP. So they don't need an Apple ID anymore. That's great. Something else that the self-service supports is the install apps through bundles. Just imagine you're a new sales colleague and you just received a new phone, and then you get an onboarding mail. And in this onboarding mail, you get a QR code. You just scan that with your phone, and all the apps that are helpful for sales colleagues get installed on your phone right away, without you ever searching any app. So that's a real cool feature that was introduced, I think, 2 versions ago in self-service. And it's just great. And also there's a description, more detailed, if there are any websites that need to be accessed for it to set up the app correctly. So that's all in one place, and it's just great. But you probably all know the self-service app, so it's not that exciting. More exciting is the Applet SAP app. You saw it in the video already. It serves actually multiple purposes. So the first one is a starting point for iOS users. So whenever they have an issue or something, they can just open the app and get information about either their device or help documents or something else. Right, it implements the certificate SDK as well. So they have to open the app to get single sign-on for other apps working as well. We push this app actually to every single device, so we can make sure that every device gets the help it needs. It can also access the iOS community in our internal communication portal, so they can read information about new iOS versions, for example, or if there's a new device feature that we want to highlight. But we didn't want to stop just there to get the single sign-on stuff working. There's also the need to unify the platforms, for example. On a Mac OS, on a Mac device, it's really simple to send an inventory update, for example. You just open self-service and tap send inventory because you have a policy there. Well, it's not that easy. Well, it is easy for iOS, but it's not natively implemented somewhere. So we actually did that. You can send inventory updates through Applet SAP. And how would you do that? Well, just scan this QR code. It would open the app, and through the Jamf Pro API, it would send an inventory update. This is great for first support. Like if you go to the help desk, what's the first troubleshooting step that you would do? You would just send an inventory update because maybe it's just waiting for exactly that to get a change pushed. So you can hand out stickers or little cards, for example, and you would just scan this code, and the app will tell you, okay, I send an inventory update, see if that is fixed now. So that's really cool and really simple also. The Jamf Pro API is really easy to use, and this feature was implemented really fast. A different feature that was actually implemented as a reaction of the migration tool is the transfer from VPP-enabled apps and managed app in general to other devices. Imagine you're in a situation where you get a new iPhone 11 Pro, Max, whatever, and you still have the old device. Now for App Store apps, of course, you can use backups and whatever, but the in-house apps doesn't come with that. So you would need to go into self-service and select every single app to install again. This is kind of stupid, especially if you have a lot of apps. Well, you could simply open the Apple SAP app and let you generate a QR code that you scan on your new device, and the new device installs every app that you had previously installed on the old device. So that way you don't have to worry about the list of applications that you have, and you don't have to do anything manually. So, and this is all done by the Jamf Pro API, but it's even more powerful. We have another app, and it's called the iOS Assist app. This is an app actually for support and administrators for Jamf Pro, and it shows you current statistics of our managed devices. So you can see how many devices do we manage, and how many iPhones, iPads, tvOS, or iPods, for example. And they're also separated by iOS versions. So you can always see how that update rate is going, for example. But we didn't stop there. We also added a device search. So if you have the privilege to access Jamf Pro as a support colleague, for example, you can just search for a device, and you can also see detailed information without the interaction with a laptop or another device. And you can also send management commands. So if a user, for example, forgot their passcode, you can just pull up your own phone, search for their device, and unlock the passcode with that. You might see where this is going. This really enables an app store, app Genius bar-like experience. And we really wanted to do exactly that. Here's some screens that show that, how that works. So on the first screen, you have the statistics. You can go to the admin tab, where you can use Face ID or Touch ID, whatever the device has, to enter the Jamf Pro console, basically, and then you get a detailed view for single devices that you looked up. Unfortunately, I can't give you a live demonstration for that, but maybe if you're interested, make sure to watch the keynote for Jamf at Work tomorrow. So that's for the iOS Assist app. There's more to come. Like, we really want to focus on how can we make the MDM features more accessible for our users. And one idea that came to our mind is the management for Apple TVs. Now, they're different from our iPhones and iPads, obviously. Apple TVs are often shared in open spaces or in offices with other colleagues, for example. Some features, on the other hand, are only accessible through MDM. Let's say single app mode, for example, or the conference mode. You can only do that through MDM. Activate and deactivate, change, whatever. So we thought of a companion app for the Apple TV. You can go to any Apple TV that you find in the company, you can scan it, and then you can access real MDM commands. This is super simple, and it's supposed to be a one-click solution for our users without the need to have a technology background. So this is just one of our app ideas. Obviously, there's even more to come. All the apps that you saw, the Apple SAP app and the iOS Assist app, all use the SAP Cloud Platform SDK for iOS. And with the help of that, we also try to implement new features that Apple introduced with iOS 13. And one of them, of course, is dark mode. So we want to make sure that our users have this consumer-like experience, that they feel home on their mobile device, and that they don't have to differentiate between private apps and work apps. They really want to have fun using work apps. How crazy sound that? So dark mode is a big thing for that. And another thing that comes with iOS 13 and macOS I almost said it, Catalina is Catalyst, of course. So this screenshot was made right after the presentation of Catalyst. And as you can see, it worked right away for the iOS Assist app. We were able to implement that on the Mac right after that, and it worked with a Touch ID. So that's really great. And we are in the middle of evaluating which apps would make sense to have a macOS version as well. Now, obviously, not every app makes sense to have on macOS, because there might be a web version for that as well. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, but some native features really make sense to have an app for that. So, and that's from the software perspective. Another big thing that comes up next year, and that really concludes this journey to 100,000 mobile devices is our movement from Macs to the Jamf cloud. So we manage our Macs on an on-premise system of Jamf Pro, but in the next year, we are trying to unify our landscape and move all these Macs to the Jamf cloud as well. And that makes a total of over 105,000 mobile devices, depending on how you define mobile devices, I guess. Yes, and with that, I actually like to end our little tour about how SAP uses Jamf. And it's just an overview. There's a lot more in detail for that, but way too much to put in one session. So I hope you enjoyed that. Make sure to check out the other presentation and keynotes. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the JNUC. Thank you. And I'm available for questions, so feel free to ask.
How many full-time developers do you have that aren't admins?
Okay, so in enterprise mobility, if you mean full-time developers for iOS, for example, we have a team around 12 to 15 people and a few students. So these are really the core team that is working on these 50 in-house applications that we have. Obviously, there are other apps from SAP for outside of SAP. They're in a different team. Yes?
Hold on, can we get you mic'd for questions so they get it on the live stream?
How are you guys doing patch management? How are you handling kind of the branching and distribution of testing, dev test? I was curious how you guys are handling that.
Sure. Okay, so when we develop apps, we usually test them in our test system, obviously. The whole development team do their own branching depending on how complex the app is. So, Git, version control and everything. The distribution itself just goes through the self-service. So whenever we feel an app is ready for our users to be used, we just put it in self-service and make them available for either everyone or just a small amount of people, depending on the use case of the app.
Do you do a different methodology for kind of general commercial applications?
We use other methods to do that, yes, but I can't tell you much about that.
Are there already any details how you would like to migrate to the Jamf cloud?
Okay, so we are in the early stage for that project. We are still, working closely with Jamf to get a whole project set up for that. But there are no actual plans ready that I can talk about right now. Sorry.
Do you utilize the sites model at SAP?
Sorry, can you
Do you
say that?
utilize the sites model?
No, we don't. Okay. Well, if there are no other questions, thank you all for your time and enjoy the rest of the JNUC.